democracy of ancient Athens is fascinating and complicated. The system itself is quite simple, but it was used by rulers and tyrants alike to attain great power and wealth, so much that it can be debated that Solon's democracy was no better than its preceding forms of government. Democracy has changed and improved over time. America and many other countries built on what the Greeks did, but they wouldn't exist without Solon's reformations. The Greeks used a relatively simple version of democracy. Modern democracies are much more complicated. Any non-criminal male over 20 years old may vote in the ecclesia and the assembly. They may also fill in any political position if they are over 30. There is a mandatory assembly where everyone can vote for people using ostracons to vote for citizens to ostracize. There are also tokens given out by the Clitoterion to cast votes for the elected political figures. There's also a group of 400 called the Bowl that guides the assembly. There are 10 generals or strategoi who manage matters of conflict. They are elected annually, and the only official in the Athenian office that has no term limit. The other elected figures are those who handle large amounts of money. There ends up being around 1,100 people in the government at any given time, and only around 100 of them are elected. The rest are chosen by a lottery. Before democracy, Athens went through several other forms of government. Similarly, some modern countries use a democracy that they didn't always have or use government. The Areopagus was a form of oligarchy, a select group of aristocrats that had control of the city-state. And there was the Draconian Constitution, a strict set of laws for the people, written by Draco. These were attempts to solve the cycle of tyrants that plagued the land. They all failed. During the cycle of tyrants, the people went to Solon and requested that he make a form of government that everyone would be happy with. In response, he made the Athenian Democracy. Everyone agreed with the concept of democracy. However, many people didn't fully agree with all of its functions. People like Aristotle, Plato, Aristophanes, and Thucydides had different ideas of what a democracy should be like. Cleisthenes was always a famous and just ruler. He was mainly credited for his reformations around 508 BC. Themistocles was a general and statesman who played a very important strategic role in the history of Athens. He was crucial in the defense of Athens during the Persian Wars. His military accomplishments were very important. He was known for strategic genius and building Athens' navy. Themistocles did do some controversial things, but was overall considered a very important figure for maintaining Athens' democracy and the independence of its people. Pericles was also an influential statesman and general of Athens. Pericles is often credited for the Golden Age of Athens, which was an age of great prosperity and advancement for the city-state. Pericles was very committed to democracy and supported it fully. He was also very dedicated to empowering the common people through encouraging them to participate in the government. He also oversaw many important and ambitious building projects of his time. The Parthenon is an excellent example. He also wore a helmet at the majority of his political appearances, because he thought that without it, he resembled the tyrant and demagogue Pisistratus. Some of democracy's critics thought that all the positions in the Athenian office should be randomized, while others believed in the opposite. Aristotle is a famous philosopher and the pupil of Plato. He believed that all political positions of Athens should be randomly given out by a lottery. He thought this would remove the roots of corruption that had ensnared Athens. This is mainly because of the many tyrants, such as Pisistratus, that reigned in his time. That does remove the application of free will, though, so it's counterproductive. Plato was also a philosopher of ancient Greece who criticized Solon's democracy. He believed that only the educated and informed should be able to vote. However, since the majority was not educated or informed, it eliminated the purpose of rule by the people. To solve all these problems at once, Plato suggested a philosopher king. It was a singular ruler that based all decisions on wisdom and justice. This would be too similar to the previous governments, however, and would push Athens back into its cycle of tyranny, so it was never implemented. Aristophanes is a famous playwright from ancient Greece who criticized democracy through his satirical plays like The Clouds. In his play, The Knights, there is a character who is a demagogue and expertly manipulates democracy and the common people to his benefit and at the expense of the people. However, Aristophanes did not have a solution he believed would improve democracy as a whole. All of these solutions completely replace some of the people's will and power in their government, making them ineffective and counterproductive. During the Peloponnesian War, Sparta made significant changes to the Athenian democracy. The war went from 431 to 404 BC. The war led to Athens relying on charismatic leaders instead of good and just leaders. It contributed heavily to the erosion of most democratic policies and norms. Events such as the oligarchic coup of the 400 and 411 BC did a lot of damage to the Athenian democracy. Then the 30 tyrants removed Athenian democracy. Eventually, it recovered after the 30 tyrants were overthrown. Later, it was even further diminished by Alexander the Great and the Macedonian War. Several centuries later, other countries made democracies with heavy changes that were improving upon the Athenian democracy. There were some changes that actually helped Athenian democracy. Cleisthenes changed Solon's democracy quite a bit, to the point of also being called the father of Athenian democracy. Pisistratus was a tyrant who was born around 608 BC. He was a descendant of Solon, and he first became known for capturing the Megarian harbor during the Battle of Megara. Later in life, he organized his own political faction, known as the Hillsmen. He committed several political deceptions and crimes, such as injuring himself to prove his enemies had attacked him, in hopes to convince the people to vote for him to get bodyguards wherever he goes. When the people voted that he could have bodyguards, he then quickly used those bodyguards to capture the Acropolis for a brief power before he was forcefully removed by the armies of Greece. After his defeat at the Acropolis, he arranged for a marriage with the daughter of Megara. He was then forced into exile to northern Greece by the father of his bride. During his exile, he built an army to prepare for his return. With the army, he attacked Attica. His invasion succeeded, and he ruled Athens for a third time, and remained in power till his death at 587 BC. Without Solon's reformations to the Athenian government, no current democracy would exist today. Athens was a war ground, a pot constantly boiling over before Solon's democracy was introduced to the population. The United States of America had a democracy as their government as a countermeasure to becoming like Great Britain, which they believed used an unfair and bigoted form of government. Imagine America without a democracy. What would it be like? I'm sure that you, along with many others, agree that it wouldn't be as fair or as free as our current democracy is.